Clara had always been a light sleeper, so the creaks and groans of her new home kept her up on most nights. At first she thought it was just the old house settling, but one morning as she stood in front of her bedroom mirror, she caught a glimpse of something that made her blood run cold. There, just over her shoulder, was a tall, shadowy figure. It had no face, no features, just a dark, menacing silhouette. She spun around, her heart pounding, but the room was empty. Maybe it was a trick of the light, she thought, or perhaps she was just overtired. But the shadow didn't stop appearing. The next morning, it was in the bathroom mirror, lurking right behind her as she brushed her teeth. It didn't move, didn't make a sound, just stood there watching. Clara began to feel its presence everywhere, even in the reflection of her TV screen late at night, just out of the corner of her eye. Disturbed and exhausted, Clara decided to set up a camera to record her bedroom while she slept. The next morning she watched the footage, hoping to find some rational explanation. What she saw instead left her frozen. The camera showed her lying in bed, fast asleep. But at exactly 3:33 a.m., a dark shadow appeared in the corner of the room, slowly gliding towards the bed. It loomed over her, bending closer and closer, until it was mere inches from her face. Then, without warning, it vanished. Clara reached out to a local paranormal investigator, a seasoned man who'd seen his fair share of hauntings. He came over one evening, setting up equipment to detect any supernatural presence. After an hour of silence, he took a look in her bedroom mirror and gasped. His face went pale, and his hands trembled as he hastily gathered his things. Before leaving, he turned to Clara and whispered, "Get rid of the mirrors. All of them." He refused to say anything more, and she never heard from him again. Now, Clara avoids mirrors altogether, covering every reflective surface in her home. But no matter what she does, she can still feel it, watching her. Aaron was a skeptic, the type who laughed at ghost stories and rolled his eyes at haunted house tales. But that all changed on a cold winter night when he received an unusual phone call. It was 3:15 a.m. when his phone rang, jolting him awake. Groggy and annoyed, he checked the caller ID, and to his surprise, it was his mother's number. He answered, but there was only silence on the other end, an eerie, suffocating silence. He called her back, but there was no answer. The next morning he drove over to check on her. She was fine and swore she hadn't called him. They both brushed it off as a strange fluke until it happened again, and again. The calls came every night, always at exactly 3:15 a.m., each time filled with static and the faintest sound of whispering, too soft to make out, but undeniably there. One night, Aaron decided to record the call. When he listened back, he realized there was more than just static. Among the crackling sounds, he could make out a voice, whispering his name over and over, each time with increasing urgency. His blood ran cold as he heard his own name whispered in a voice that sounded like his mother's, but somehow, wrong. The voice had an unsettling, unnatural tone to it, as though it were being forced through the phone line from some otherworldly place. Desperate for answers, Aaron contacted his phone provider, hoping they could trace the calls. But when they pulled up his records, there was no trace of any incoming calls at 3:15 a.m. In fact, his mother's number hadn't made a single call to him in weeks. Disturbed, he changed his number, thinking that would finally put an end to it. But the calls continued. It didn't matter that he had a new number. Every night at 3:15 a.m., his phone would ring, displaying unknown caller. He stopped answering, but one night, curiosity got the better of him. He picked up, and this time the voice wasn't whispering his name. Instead it said, "You can't escape us, Aaron. We know where you are." He threw the phone down, his hands shaking, and hasn't answered a call in the middle of the night since. Local legend had it that a young girl drowned in the village river years ago, her death a tragic accident that haunted the community. The villagers claimed her ghost could often be seen at night, sitting by the riverbank, her face hidden as she wept. Most dismissed the stories as folklore, but Peter, a self-proclaimed skeptic, decided to investigate for himself. Armed with a flashlight and a sense of adventure, he headed down to the river one misty autumn night. The air was thick and cold, the kind of chill that seeps into your bones. As he made his way along the riverbank, he heard it, a soft, pitiful sobbing that echoed through the trees. He called out, "Hello? Is someone there?" but received no response. He crept closer, his heart pounding as he spotted a small figure in white, sitting by the water's edge, her back to him. She appeared to be no more than a child, her shoulders shaking as she wept. Peter took a step closer, his flashlight illuminating the girl's figure. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice shaking slightly. Slowly, the girl lifted her head and turned to face him. Her eyes were hollow black pits, and her mouth was stretched wide in a silent scream. He stumbled back, nearly dropping his flashlight as she began to crawl toward him, her hands clawing at the ground, moving with an unnatural speed. He turned and ran, not daring to look back, but he could hear her following him, the sound of her dragging limbs closing in. He reached his car and sped away, his heart racing. The next morning he returned to the riverbank, hoping it had all been a nightmare. But on the ground where the girl had been sitting, he found small muddy footprints leading straight into the water, and vanishing. Peter refuses to go near the river to this day, haunted by the memory of those hollow empty eyes, and the sound of her sobbing still echoes in his mind at night. Thank you for joining us tonight on Veil of Mysteries. These stories remind us that the world is full of things we may never understand. But whether you believe them or not, one thing is certain. They'll stay with you long after the lights go out. If you have your own paranormal story, share it with us in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of the terrifying tales we uncover. Until next time, remember, curiosity can be dangerous, but that's what makes it so thrilling.